Episode 38 of the Rain Race podcast here this evening. I'm joined alongside, of course, by, as always, terrible intro, Racing Nation TV.
What's up, guys?
We got a lot to talk about today, Kyle. We've got
A lot.
yeah. See, we missed a week. Last week, we didn't have an episode. I was unfortunately caught up with a little bit of schoolwork.
School comes first.
But yeah, school does have to come first, unfortunately, as painful as it is sometimes. It's not like I was doing anything fun. Software isn't always fun. But it's not too bad because we didn't have that much to worry about for last week's episode. But this week, oh man, we got a whole news dump to talk about. Before we talk about any of that, I just want to say, because it has been 2 weeks, that if you're new and this is your first time listening to the podcast, you can check out all of our episodes on podcasting platforms anywhere. Tomorrow should be up tomorrow night. Depends on the time or what time exactly. I'm not sure. Kind of just depends when I get to it. But that's like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. All those platforms should be there, and you can go listen to us after the fact. A little bit easier if you're listening like in the car or something like that. And if you're live with us on YouTube right now, you can comment your questions, and we'll hopefully get to them at some point during the episode. But the main talking point for this episode, obviously, Ferrari confirmed for Le Mans Hypercar. Now, the first thing I want to say on this is that, we heard some hints about this. I know Marshall Pruitt sort of hinted at it a little bit in his This Week in IndyCar podcast. He sounded pretty confident that it was happening. And then I saw one article on motorsport.com from, I believe, December, which also subtly hinted at the fact that a Ferrari hypercar was coming, but they too seemed confident about it. So the thing I found most interesting about this whole thing is, it's a pretty big announcement. Would you agree with me on that, Kyle? I mean,
Yeah,
Ferrari going to the top class of Le Mans again, that's a pretty decent sized announcement. And I'm
especially
just,
since it's a hypercar announcement, not an LMDH announcement.
yeah. And I mean, I'm kind of questioning how that slipped under the radar. I mean, if people had definitive, I guess, reasoning that this was going to be a thing, we didn't have any of the, I guess, headlines. We kind of got teasers within other articles that, hey, Ferrari's making a hypercar, by the way. But I never once saw a definitive article saying, yup, this is happening and we know it's happening. Which I found a little bit interesting because, I mean, this is huge news in the grand scheme of things. This brings the LMH car manufacturer count up. It's going to be Toyota now. Baikalus, still sort of a question mark. I mean, Baikalus was supposed to be on the grid this season, and we haven't really heard anything since September, as far as I've heard, on their program. Glickenhaus, they are now set to be starting at Spa because they were supposed to be starting at Spa initially, and then Portimao became a thing, which replaced Sebring. It was a little bit later. They said they were going to be at the season opener at Portimao, and then they sort of jumped back on that decision because of the
But
same
they
reason.
have been on track.
Yes, they have been on track now, which is great, and we're going to talk about that maybe a little bit later on. So Glickenhaus is up there. Peugeot, obviously, up there as well for a 2022 entrance, as it seems. And now Ferrari. So that's 5 manufacturers for Le Mans Hypercar. And Alpine, we've heard some rumblings that they may be looking into either Le Mans Hypercar or LMDH. We'll have to see on them. But yeah, I mean, the future definitely looks bright, especially Le Mans 2023. It's just it's looking really grand right now, especially when you add in the entries from Porsche and Audi. They've both seemed very interested in bringing their LMDH cars to Le Mans. So I think we're going into another golden era here. And that brings up a concern of its own, which I do want to address a little bit later on. But first of all, Kyle, your initial impressions on this Ferrari announcement.
Yeah, it's definitely a good thing to get another hypercar announcement rather than because the last few announcements have just been LMDH, which obviously just means that a manufacturer is going to build bodywork onto a chassis and an engine. Ferrari's going in all the way, and I think that's really good. And the Ferrari fan base, possibly some Ferrari drivers, as Leclerc has already said that he is interested. We could get some, other Ferrari drivers to compete. Obviously, really it was just an announcement of, hey, we're doing this. We don't have any details on engine, the name of the car, nothing else, just 2023, and they're doing this. But yeah, I mean, definitely huge for sports car racing to have them there. The only thing we need now is for a Ford and Multimatic confirmation to get another Ford versus Ferrari going, but it's already going to be insane enough as it is.
Taurus asked, any news on Ferrari's chosen engine configuration? No, nothing yet. Kyle, like you just said, it's basically, I mean, it was just an announcement. Yeah, we're doing this. Nothing beyond that. Nothing on drivers. Nothing on, what team is even going to be running the car. We did hear that it's going to be a factory effort. So, I mean, which makes sense. I wouldn't expect anything else from a hypercar program when you're already spending millions of dollars to get it up in the air. I'm certainly not surprised that a factory effort was on the cards. But nothing for engine. Now, something that I do want to bring up that I found a little bit interesting is that you may remember back, I'm trying to remember when this would have been. This might have been early 2020 or late 2019. The Glickenhaus was actually it was rumored to be having an Alfa Romeo engine. I believe it was a twin turbo V6. Don't quote me on that. But it certainly was strongly rumored even, that Alfa Romeo would be supplying the power unit in the Glickenhaus Le Mans Hypercar. And regulation changes by the ACO regarding the hypercar class ultimately meant that they weren't able to do that. And then they sort of reverted on that decision later on. So Alfa could have actually been their engine partner, but Glickenhaus ended up going with the V8 from Pipo Motors. So my question is that engine that was, I mean, I'm going off an assumption here. There's no proof that Alfa Romeo was going to be building an engine for that car. But my assumption, or I guess my prediction could be that there may be a little bit of a tie-in there. Alfa Romeo and Ferrari, obviously both owned by Fiat Chrysler. So there is that tie-in there. There's the tie-in that they have with the Formula One teams. I mean, we'll have to see. I think that a turbo V6, something along those lines, wouldn't be surprising to me. I wouldn't expect anything like a V12. I would be pleasantly surprised if that was a thing. But no, I wouldn't expect anything above a V6, a turbo V6 or a V8, something along those lines. Also a four-cylinder, which would be pretty surprising as well, but nothing on that yet. We'll have to see on hybrid. I'm sure that they're considering, or I'm sure that they're, heavily interested in doing a hybrid system because they already do it with Formula One. But no, nothing yet beyond the announcement that they're doing it.
I mean, this is also a surprising announcement too, if you think about it, because the last time Ferrari had any involvement in prototype sports car racing was the 333 SP in the 90s, and that car was made, mostly by Dallara. Ferrari just did the actual chassis and the engine. And then before that, when they originally left sports car racing in like 73, they left because to focus solely on F1. And the whole talking point the last few years of why doesn't Ferrari enter prototypes, it's that their focus is solely on F1. And in a time right now when the F1 team is probably at its worst, is probably the time you'd least expect them to actually join prototype racing, which is something I find, very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really see that much of a tie-in personally with the Formula One team with the hypercar program, but the thing that I think it boils down to is what's 2023 in terms of Le Mans. It's the centennial running. There's going to be a ton of manufacturers that are interested in fighting for it. I think that that's a huge negotiating tactic right there, as they can say, oh, look what's coming up in 2 years' time. It's the 100th, not 100th running, but 100th anniversary of the first 24 hours of Le Mans. I mean, that's a headline thing. I feel like a lot of manufacturers are interested in that. And I'm not surprised that Ferrari, well, I guess I should say I am a little bit surprised that they're jumping on it because, like I said, it was a little bit of a surprise announcement. But I'm not surprised at their motives, I guess I should say. Real quick, Ray Krieger, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, said I assume it means Baikalis, didn't want to participate in 2021 due to the cost to compete at just a few races due to the pandemic. I believe I actually might have seen something saying that. I think you are correct. And then the other thing that I saw was Gam Wolfers saying it's been decades since we've had 5 manufacturers, 8 including LMDH, that are competing for Le Mans. What a time we're living in. Yeah, and that brings me to my next point, which is we've had this talk about Le Mans Hypercar and LMDH. Now, those classes were both sort of promised to us as converged classes at the 2020 Rolex 24. Kyle, you were there for that press conference, and higher ups from the ACO and IMSA were both there saying, yes, we're going to make these two classes on equal playing ground to fight for the overall win at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And that's what was promised to us at the time. Now, look back to that time. The manufacturers that we had, I believe that was right after Aston Martin. No, sorry, that was Aston Martin, I think, pulled their entry after that. So at the time, Hypercar was expected to have Toyota, Glickenhaus, Baikalis. Again, they were sort of on the verge of an announcement, but they're always sort of unpredictable in what they'll actually end up doing. And Aston Martin. And of course, LMDH, which was just announced then, had effectively nobody confirmed, but certainly a lot of interest. Well, now Le Mans Hypercar is gaining a lot of attention from these manufacturers. It's gaining a lot of commitments from manufacturers. So what I'm wondering is, is this going to play a factor in, maybe not convergence as a whole, but are the Le Mans Hypercars going to have an advantage over the LMDH cars? I know James Glickenhaus has been upfront about saying that there's no way the ACO is going to allow Porsche or going to allow Audi to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans with an LMDH car. I mean, nice horse car. Do you have any opinions on that in its own? I think that, I was talking to you and I was talking to David about this over the weekend. If they do this, right, and we have this golden era, you have to act like you're on the fritz once again. You have to act like this is 2018 LMP1 where you don't have a ton of manufacturer interest, and you have to try to get the best with what you have, because if you get too confident, then I think that's what sort of takes the fun away from it. It's what really makes it more of a political game than an all-out fight. And I'm just hoping that we don't see a repeat of that, because what we have right now is so much potential and so much promise that anything short of what we have in our heads right now, of what the 2023 24 Hours of Le Mans could look like, would just be a letdown. So I'm just curious to think or hear what you think about that.
I think the exact same thing. I mean, there's no way the ACO is going to let LMDH win the 24 Hours Le Mans. There's just... And seeing Glickenhaus being so open about it's been pretty amusing to me. Yeah, I mean, having to balance them, I think, is going to be a process in itself. And I think you can very easily get that wrong. And the more manufacturers that join Hypercar, the more pull, you're not gonna make everybody happy. And it's just, yeah, you're totally right. It's gonna make it's a little scary, but the promise that it has, I mean, man, I just hope they don't screw this up.
Because what you're riding on right now, what they're riding on, is a wave of hype. You can look at the headlines and you'll say, oh, I mean, look, we'll sit here right now and say we have 7 or 8 manufacturers that can fight for the overall win in just 2 years from now. And that right there has so much promise. We haven't been able to say that in how many years now? I think, they have a lot of pressure going into that one right there. I'm just curious to see what decisions they're going to make regarding the balance of performance and regarding how balanced the two two formulas of cars actually are. I'm cautiously optimistic because, let's be honest, we've been burned in the past because there was talk about DPI. I mean, DPI was almost promised to us that they'd be allowed to compete in the LMP2 class. And sure enough, that was sort of taken away after IMSA had already committed to DPI. So, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this isn't a repeat of that, because I think that there already is. There's, It's fair to say there's already a lot of promise just in the Le Mans Hypercar class, but if you can add Audi and Porsche to the equation, maybe Honda slash Acura as well, I think that you're just adding that much more prestige and that much more competition, and that in turn draws more eyes to the event.
I mean, I've been super skeptical about LMDH as a whole already because, I mean, the next regulation of LMP2 hasn't come out yet, and all of the programs that have committed to LMDH, I don't believe have partnered with anyone on who's going to be building their chassis. And seeing how LMP2 is right now, I mean, I think you're going to need more chassis manufacturers before LMDH. We haven't seen, I mean, I think it'll happen, but I'm just saying we haven't seen it yet. And for a formula that's happening next year?
No, 2023.
2023.
Yeah.
As for a category that's going to happen in 23, I mean, the next I'd say 8-12 months are super important.
So what exactly are you looking for? You're looking for the chassis manufacturers?
Of just LMDH as a whole. Just skeptical, like, yeah, looking for chassis manufacturers.
Okay, because the chassis manufacturers, and I made a mistake, and might have been the last show, might have been the show before.
I think it was a show before.
The chassis manufacturers are confirmed to be Orica, Ligier, Multimatic, and Dallara once again. So,
right,
we already have that. But
we missed that one.
So yeah, I'm trying to think of a good timetable for LMDH. The only LMDH manufacturers that have committed so far were Acura, Porsche, and Audi. Which, I think that that's a good number already to commit to a formula that's not due for another almost 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly there's interest. I think Cadillac is already, they're certainly GM / Cadillac is certainly interested in it. Mazda, unfortunately, downplayed any interest that they had in it, so we're not expecting them anymore. But I wouldn't be concerned quite yet, because I think that we're not really in the time frame right now. I can't remember when exactly most of the DPI programs or manufacturers were announced, but I think that we're in a reasonable time frame right now for that. Macaulay Davies says there's a lot of potential in Le Mans racing, but there's more questions than answers at the moment. Yes, that's absolutely correct. And this sort of ties back to what I was saying with, you have to balance these two classes of cars well. And the main reason for that is if you have two formulas of cars competing in, essentially, I don't know what their plans are right now. I don't know if they plan to have like separate classes or I don't believe that's been talked about yet. But if you have two formulas of cars competing for the overall win at Le Mans, as was promised to us, by the way, and they're not really on equal footing, well, then it becomes even harder to explain to somebody who's really new or somebody who's maybe just tuning into the 24 Hours of Le Mans because of the interest that gets brought into that event, but they're not really invested in the whole championship. That brings a lot of questions, especially when you bring balance of performance into the equation. You can explain to somebody, oh, well, balance of performance really balances all these cars together so that they're supposed to be on equal footing. Okay, well then, hey, how come, the Audis and the Porsches and the Hondas aren't able to compete for overall wins, and it's just these guys and the hypercars, and what's the difference between hypercar and LMDH? It's certainly a confusing period for sports car racing. Although it's very promising with the manufacturer interest that we have, it is certainly, I think, more confusing than LMP1 was, where it was just, LMP1. If you're in LMP1, you can split it hybrid, non-hybrid if you want. But pretty much anybody in LMP1 effectively was on a similar pace level. Of course, Toyota at Le Mans sort of walked away with it from 2018 to 2020. But, overall on single lap pace, the cars are pretty similar, I think it's fair to say. But so yeah, you're right. You're gonna have to figure that out, and that's when I say the eyes of the world are on you. That's what I mean. Especially if you get a driver like Charles Leclerc, Ferrari, Ferrari's going to pull in a ton of interest. Doesn't matter what they do with that program. Doesn't matter if they have all GT drivers in that program. That program has a ton of potential to pull in some people from Formula One, and I'm sure it will, especially for Le Mans. And I'm fingers crossed that they get it right.
So Taurus asked a good question. How important is it that IMSA imminently announced LMDH and LMDH will both be legal for racing in North America? Which asks another question, for me, is, so obviously right now IMSA hasn't, they haven't confirmed whether or not LMH will be able to race at Daytona or whether they won't. Because we know that LMDH can go and race at Le Mans, but LMH still might not be able to race at Daytona. And what that makes me wonder is, do you think IMSA is delaying that because they know that the balance of performance is going to work more to the hypercars' favor, and they don't want the hypercars from WEC coming and basically dominating their, crown jewel races? That's kind of what that says to me.
Well, I mean, ultimately, IMSA, if any car enters their event, they have control over the BOP. So, I mean,
It all depends. I mean, do they?
Well, yes. I mean, effectively, they can add any, BOP they want to the LMP2 cars. Yes, the LMP2 class is essentially an ACO formula. I mean, but if they wanted to, they really could BOP them. There's just really no need to, because if you do that, then you start going into the fact of, all right, well, some of these teams are coming over from the World Endurance Championship. You're sort of, playing into that a little bit, but there's nothing really stopping them from doing it. But back to Taurus's question, I think it's extremely important that, we see some convergence between LMH and LMDH on the IMSA side as well. And to me, that all comes down to what I was just talking about, where, if you're a normal fan, you're not highly invested in sports car racing, that's where the confusion thing comes in again. And, I already see people who are saying, okay, well, how come Cadillac and Acura and Mazda race at Daytona, but they don't race at Le Mans? And, it's easy for someone like me to explain, all right, well, they're two different series and two completely different formulas, but it's going to be even harder to explain if you have LMDH cars fighting for the overall win at Le Mans, but LMH cars are not allowed to fight at Daytona. Or they're maybe not even allowed at Daytona. Because that's, everybody right now has been saying that the Le Mans hypercars won't be allowed to race in IMSA. And I know Glickenhaus has been hinting that they are going to be allowed. At least their car is going to be allowed. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see on that one. But I think it's extremely important that, convergence needs to mean convergence. I don't want an asterisk over it saying, oh, well, they're allowed to race at Le Mans, but Daytona's sort of an iffy. But I think it is important that we have full convergence, because even from an explanation standpoint, it's just easier to explain. And it's, I think, better for the health of the series in general when you have more entries across, even if it's across two different formulas. Taurus asked again, wasn't there an LMP 500 and an LMP 700 that were competitive with each other at some tracks a decade ago? Yeah, it was. Well, it'd be LMP 900 and LMP 675, which then became LMP 1 and LMP 2. Yeah, so in the American Le Mans series in 2007 through 2008 really was what I like to call the golden era of American Le Mans series prototype racing. Yeah, sure, certainly you'd have Audi in the LMP1 class. They were sort of the main guns in that class. And LMP2, you would have the Porsche RS Spyder, the Acura ARXs. I mean, those are the two big players in that class. And yeah, they would sort of bounce off each other for who had the fastest car at each track. The main premise of the whole competition between the two was LMP1 was heavier. The cars were heavier. And that's where the 900 came in. I believe it was 900 kilograms and 675 kilograms for LMP 675. So LMP1 essentially had more power, but they were heavier. LMP2 had less power, but they were lighter. So, at a track like Long Beach, the LMP2 cars were actually a little bit better because they were more nimble. They could get around the corners faster on a tight street circuit. Tracks like Road America, the Audi was a little bit quicker. So yeah, that was a thing before. It's not anything unique. It's just something that certainly you're going to have to explain and, make sure that people understand about your series, because it's going to lead to even more confusion otherwise. But in terms of Le Mans, there was really no point in time where LMP2 cars were fighting for the overall win, unless you want to talk about 2017, which was really just a fluke. Ray said, I've also seen Koenigsegg take interest in a Le Mans Hypercar. I'd imagine they'd make a Le Mans Hypercar because their philosophy revolves around being built in-house. Yeah, I've seen like slight talk about that. I haven't seen anything serious. But yeah, I think you make a good point that I too would expect them to do a Le Mans Hypercar, because LMDH doesn't really seem like their route. They're obviously, Koenigsegg develops some of the most exotic cars in the world, some of the most interesting cars in the world, some of the fastest cars in the world. So yeah, I could see that Le Mans Hypercar would go around with their philosophy. I think that's all I really have to say on the Ferrari announcement for now, because there wasn't a ton of news, as we said. It's just obviously a big headline, and we'll have to wait for the future to see some more about that program. Moving on, though. I saw something, well, I've seen a couple things, and I've heard a couple things over the past week, that Le Mans may be postponed again. And I just want to touch on this briefly, because these are just rumors at the moment. But I did see, and these are, as far as I know, unconfirmed reports, but I did see that there's a chance that they could be delaying the 24 Hours of Le Mans to mid / end of August. Last year it was in the middle of September. And also the chance that we may hear something about that later in the week. And the goal with that is, quite simply, they want to get fans at the race. They didn't have any fans there last year. They tried initially. They had a plan with their whole, I think, fan villages, is whatever they were trying to call their proposal. It didn't end up going through with it, so they had no fans last year. They really want fans this year. And from what I've heard, the European Union has been a little bit troublesome distributing the COVID vaccines. So perhaps a delay in that is in the works. We'll have to see on that, because, as I said, as far as I know, this is all unconfirmed at the time. Or I know we haven't heard anything definitively, but I have heard that we may hear an announcement about that later in the week. Let's see. I'm trying to think of anything else to talk about on the WEC front. We were talking of, actually, I'll bounce back to Glickenhaus, because we were talking about them earlier on. They did run I think, 2-day test at Vallelunga. I hope that's how it's pronounced, in Italy, which is where the car is being developed. It's being built by Podium Engineering over in Italy, and they ran a 2-day test over there. And according to Glickenhaus himself, seems like the car ran without any major issues, and it ran to plan. So certainly a positive there. Very excited to see what they're going to be able to do. I think Glickenhaus is really an eye-turning team, and I'm just stoked for him, because I don't know the last time we've really seen, and it certainly hasn't happened in the last 10 years, where you've had a manufacturer that's just said, let's build a car from scratch. We've had some privateers like SMP and Rebellion. They'd bring a car that was sort of like an off-the-shelf car. I know Rebellion developed their own car with Orica, but I think what Glickenhaus is doing is certainly unique, and everybody seems to be a fan of what they're doing. They're not doing it conventionally, let's say that for sure. But yeah, we'll have to see what they can pull off in the future, and they're not going to be starting, as I hinted at earlier, until Spa. Macaulay said they did 120 laps, which is pretty good. Yeah, indeed. They seem pretty confident about their engine reliability, and we'll have to see how that car performs at Le Mans later in the year. Kyle, I'm at a bit of a standstill here. Do you have any IndyCar news or anything?
Well, testing's been happening a little bit.
Sure.
Grosjean's been testing. He
Oh, you know
wrecked
what?
in his
Yes, because
first
it's
test.
yeah, it's been because it was 2 weeks, and yeah, I completely forgot that we missed the Grosjean test. So do you want to go over that a
It
little bit?
happened. It happened. Grosjean spun, and then kept testing, and he tested today at Laguna Seca. I believe he was. I heard he was fastest today. Uh, can't really confirm that or not, but yeah. Um, the IndyCar world, yeah. I mean, everything's spec in IndyCar. It kind of just tests. You look at the board, you smile at it, and then things keep going. There's really not that much importance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, the only other thing I probably have to talk
very
about right
in
now,
depth.
yes, I know there was an article on Planet F1 that suggested that Pietro Fittipaldi may be running the oval races for Romain Grosjean and the Dale Coyne Rick Ware entry. I don't know if you heard anything about that or if you have any opinions on that. I know we were speculating, I don't know, 2-3 episodes ago for a good 15 minutes about who could drive the ovals in that car. We kept talking about Cody Ware. I don't remember who else kept being brought up. I think Davison was brought up quite a lot. But
I
now it looks
believe
like
Davison's confirmed to not be running it. There's been some. I mean, there's basically Pietro's in the. He's in that group of drivers that's been talked about running that car in the ovals. I believe Davis. I would say Davison's probably off the board, but then again, I wouldn't be totally surprised if his name got brought back. I think Cody Ware um, actually finally was like given that he didn't have enough experience. I think the drivers um, brought up some concerns to IndyCar, and I don't believe he will be doing the ovals. I don't believe that's just what I've heard. Just some little speculation, little rumors, but yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it was Pietro. I'd say he's probably the front runner for that seat if he wants to do it, if he has the time to do it. Is he? He's still the Haas reserve driver, is he?
I
For
believe so.
21.
I
Yeah.
believe so.
Didn't get the seat, but I believe he's still the reserve. I would say he's probably the front runner.
Which is interesting because I don't think you or I brought that up. So once again, our 15 minutes of speculations for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Only the best here. Only the best. Macaulay asks, as Americans, do you like when you hear ex-F1 drivers talk so highly of IndyCar compared to F1 racing? Um, for me personally, I think that it's interesting, when an F1 driver comes over to America and they drive, a road course series, in our country. The thing I thought about immediately when you asked that was Kevin Magnussen, who really seems like he's been enjoying the Chip Ganassi DPI program, just because I think he likes the fact that it's less pressure, and I think Grosjean's likely going to feel the same way with the Dale Coyne entry. When you're in Formula One, you really are at the pinnacle of motorsports. Whether it's your favorite series or not, whether you like it or not, Formula One on a worldwide scheme is the biggest, most popular series, hands down. And along with that, you have sponsor commitments, you have, PR you have to take care of. You have to, sometimes it almost feels like you're not in charge of the driving, I imagine, because of how, thinly strung those cars are. You have to sort of tweak them to actually run a complete race in them. And I have noted that Kevin Magnussen enjoys the freedom that he's getting with the Cadillac, where he can just sort of sit down and drive without modifying that much. Kyle, I don't know if you have anything from your perspective on that, but
Seems like the drivers that come over from F1 seem to like our racetracks here in the US a lot. I wonder why. It's pretty crazy. They always seem to like our racetracks a lot more.
yeah. Hey, I just remembered we have some races we can talk about from this past
Ooh,
weekend. Yeah, supercars. It's back. Um, they did a doubleheader, the Bathurst 500, which was two 250-kilometer races. Um, and I just want to talk briefly about it. Now, I want to preface this by saying, first of all, I'm not a huge supercars fan. I definitely enjoy watching it, but I can't talk too much about it because it's not my level of expertise, and I don't want to say something incorrect. So I'm sure there are other podcasts out there if that's what you're looking for. But I do want to touch briefly on it. The thing that I noticed, especially in race 2, was that Cam Waters lost a little bit of time to Shane in the pits, Shane Van Gisbergen, and came out. Shane got him right after turn 1 on that long straightaway up the mountain, and beat him out because he was on warmer tires on the mountain section itself. And the thing that Cam Waters was saying, and that Shane was saying, and that Scott McLaughlin was even saying on Twitter, is how difficult it is to race at Bathurst in dirty air. And I noticed this as well at last year's Bathurst 1000 when it came down to Cam Waters and Shane Van Gisbergen. Every time you thought, okay, Cam has the fastest car here, and he's going to hunt down Shane, he might be able to get a move on and win this race. Same thing we were thinking this weekend. It wasn't really the case, and it's because, as all the drivers were saying, you have a huge dirty air problem with those cars. And I think Scott said that it's a problem that's been there for like the last 2.5 years or so. That leads me to believe it would have been something starting in 2018. Am I doing my math correct there? Yeah, 2018. So the new Mustang came out in 2000. Oh man, was it 2019 or 2020? Can't remember. It was
I think it was 19. It wasn't 20.
It wasn't 20? I was going to All right. Completely losing it here.
I'm a little less, 'cause I would have said 18.
No, it wasn't 18. It was either 19 or 20. I think you might be right with 19, but Andrew, help us out. I see you in the comments there. But the new Holden has been around since I think 2018.
Redacted.
So, yeah, that's unfortunate. But I don't know what change they would have made from before that, because the formula hasn't changed that dramatically in the last, they had the new generation of cars come out 2013 or 14. Again, I'm not an expert on this. Andrew says 2019 for the Mustang, but I'm just curious as to why that would have been an issue the past couple of years. You can tell we're not supercars experts here. But the one thing that this does lead me to is the next generation of cars for supercars, which is coming next year with the new Ford Mustang and the Camaro. They're promoting less, I guess, overbody downforce. I don't know if that's the correct term. More underbody downforce. Trying to reduce the amount of dirty air that they have. Same thing that NASCAR is really trying to do. Hey, look, there's that tie-in. Everybody mentions the next Gen NASCAR is similar to a V8 supercar.
Now it's even more.
Yeah. But, that's the only point I really have. Hopefully, with the next gen.
What are the differences between the next gen Mustang and this gen? Because the Camaro is obviously way different than the Holden, but
there was
the big difference.
There was an article that highlighted all the changes. I'd have to see if I can pull it up here real quick. But I do know that it mainly... Let's see if I can find it. Oh, yes. Hang on. I might have found it. I do know that they were trying to have less dirty air by having less overbody downforce. I think it was something along like 200 kilograms less downforce. Or something along those lines. But I don't know if I'd be able to find that off the top of my head.
Basically, they're just pulling an IndyCar. It's like, oh, we're gonna have this new car that looks like the old, kind of like the old one, but it's got less stuff on it. We're gonna produce downforce from under the car, and we're just gonna create better racing. Poof, boom.
Rico just commented 15 in the chat. I think he means 2015 was the new supercars regulations. Which I thought it was 14 because I thought that's when the Volvo came out, but I'm not an expert on that. That's all you're going to hear me talk about that. But yeah, certainly if you do want to watch some supercars races in your stateside or you're anywhere that's not Australia or New Zealand, you can check it out on YouTube and subscribe to their thing on their channel for like $5 a month or whatever currency converted to your
which
country.
Is what other racing series should be doing, like IndyCar, who has a problem with getting their races internationally. So if you're in a country that you can't get IndyCar on your TV, isn't it great idea if they could just like pay some money and get it on YouTube. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
They're gonna go to Peacock. Can you even do Peacock internationally?
I don't
Can
know.
every country
I don't
do
think.
that?
No, I don't think so. I think it's
YouTube's for everybody. Oh, but that'd just be too smart. We
Save it
can't
for
do
another
that.
day. We've already had this discussion before. Andrew said the quest. This is a quote from their website, by the way, from Supercar's website. The quest for better racing includes a targeted aerodynamic downforce reduction of more than 50% from current levels. That's quite significant. I thought I saw some of that on the realms of like 200 kilograms. Maybe that was just 200 kilograms less of like overbody downforce. I don't know. Maybe we'll try to find the graphic that I saw when they introduced the new cars, and we'll talk about that in a future episode. So Macaulay asked, the Bathurst 1000 is canceled this year, right? No.
No, that's the Bathurst 12-hour
Yeah.
you're thinking about.
Yeah, it was the 12-hour, which was replaced by these supercars.
See, this double sprint race was cool until you realized that the 12-hour didn't happen, and that would have been like this time of year.
Yep. Tara said, yeah, you can watch Peacock with a VPN. Yeah. If a VPN service wants to sponsor the podcast, then maybe we'll plug that. Gam Wolfer said the next gen supercar looks like a Trans Am TA2 car. Yeah, I did notice that. So the one thing I have with the new supercar is that, and this is a shame to me because I love the look of the current supercars, is that it's almost the direction that DTM is going. Not quite, because DTM just said, fuck it, we're just going to go full GT3. But supercars, those, they look, I'd have to say they look closer to a GT4 car. And of course, yes, GT4 stands for Grand Touring. And, you can say, oh, it's a touring car, but it doesn't have that sort of, quintessential Aussie V8 supercar styling to me. I'm not that much of I don't want to say I'm not much of a fan of it. I certainly think it looks pretty good. But to me, I think it's a step down looks-wise, but that's just opinion.
But what model would car manufacturers use nowadays? Everybody I'm waiting for the first SUV racing series because that's all car manufacturers anyways.
No, it's the Super Utes.
Oh well,
the Aussie Super Utes.
Duh. But okay, well, see, that's the problem. Is the Super Utes series was originally, racing Utes. And actually, what's funny is when I was reading about, there was a time when I was reading about the supercars regulations, they actually did think about making Utes the primary series. But it's like, that's the problem, because Utes used to be like its own thing. And now when you look at car manufacturers, I mean, especially in the US, like what like cars are, like what does GM and Ford make besides SUVs now? Like, what do they make? It's pretty much all SUVs, and they're all electric.
Do not get me started down the American car market hellhole, because I will go on that for hours.
You don't have to do that. But it's just a point. It's a point, and it's correct. It's like, because they did actually consider making Utes like supercars, because, like, seriously, think about it. What car? Like that's why they're going to the Camaro and they're running 2-doors instead of 4-door cars, because like, here in the U.S., like, does a 4-door sedan like exist anymore?
They're dying, sadly.
It's a Honda Civic. I mean,
but that's more of that's more of a United States car market thing. Over in Europe, you can still get a better selection of hatchbacks and sedans. It's just America's this obsession with SUVs.
Okay, what sedans are in Australia then?
Well, I don't know. I don't live in Australia, but
they're getting rid of the Holden.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
if they're getting rid of the Holden, what cars does Ford make over? Like, I mean, these are things obviously we have to look up, but obviously it's a problem over there too.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing I hate, is the fact that the Holden brand as a whole is getting axed. Because I don't really care that they were rebranded. The diehard Australian Holden fan is gonna be pissed off at the fact that the later gen Commodores are basically just an Opel / Buick / Vauxhall / whatever you want. Any insert name here, GM International brand, like Regal or what was it was the Opel Astra, I think, was the European version of the Commodore. But to me, there's just something about seeing the Holden name in supercars, and just Camaro. It doesn't. I don't want to see a Camaro in the supercar series. I'm sorry, I just don't. It's to me, it's just there's something about Holden versus Ford, and I'm not even an Australian. I've only been watching the series, more than one race for a season or two now. So it's a shame, but what are you gonna do?
When's the first SUV series? We got that like Extreme E. So those are like just spec electric SUVs. They're not like manufactured. But like seriously, when are we getting our SUV racing series? When is that happening in the US? I'm down.
Well, they have the you know what else they have? They have the what is it? The Jaguar, the I-Type. What's the SUV? The Formula E
E-Type because it's an electric SUV.
Yeah, okay, that one.
Yeah, get electric SUVs. Ford could still enter the Mustang.
The Mustang Mach-E Racing Series.
Finally
I don't know.
Jeep
You know what?
Motorsports.
It may not be that far away, but I don't want to see it.
Everyone's out here talking about electric and hybrid racing. Where's the SUV racing at?
Well, you can kill two birds with one stone. You get the Mach-E's and the Tesla model.
Well, you make it more interesting, and you don't just limit it to electric, but a Jeep, Cherokee Compass out there, and because there's no electric Jeep.
Yeah,
I don't think Dodge Chrysler makes any electric like SUVs like the other manufacturers do.
Oh, just wait.
That's gonna happen.
The I-Pace trophy.
No.
That was the
actually no. We've talked about this. The Jeep Chrysler, Dodge Chrysler. They just like they're going the opposite way, and they're sticking like Hellcat engines in the in the Grand Cherokee.
Yeah, no, it's not the Grand Cherokee. Well, yeah, that's the Trailhawk. Yeah, but they also did the SRT Hellcat engine in what? It was the God, what did they put it in? Was it the van?
No.
No, I swear they did something. They put it in a van, I swear.
It's not a town and country, I'll tell you that. Whatever they call it.
I don't know. Oh, wait. Did they make... Was this real? They didn't do... No, okay, good. I was going to say, there's no way they made a Chrysler Pacifica Hellcat.
There's no way.
I swear they put it in a van, though.
They did start an SUV series just to have Dodge Chrysler enter have all these electric manufacturers, and then Dodge just sticks a Hellcat Grand Cherokee in there. Boom. Or the SRT. Was that a Durango? What are they?
Was that what SUV? No, wait. Was that what it was?
Did they put Durango?
Did they? Yeah, they might have put the Hellcat engine in a Durango. They did. Okay, that's what it was. Maybe that's what I was thinking of then. I think.
There's no point in this. What?
Okay.
Still anyway. going down this like rabbit hole, but like what would I want to like be a fly in the wall during the boardroom meeting. It's like, hey, we got this big, powerful Hellcat engine. What do we put it in? Dude in the corner. I got a Durango.
Well, they're just putting that engine in everything now for fun. I mean, they're gonna pull a Dodge Dart out of the bin, front wheel drive, and 707 whatever horsepower. Just let it rip.
It's just like the Colt Vela swapping everything. We're just gonna put Hellcat engines and everything.
Yeah, except they do it right from the dealer.
Mm-hmm.
Right from the production line. Sabuka says SUVs might find a home in rally, ?
That'd be wild.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with rally is that those cars, they have to be really nimble. And SUVs aren't. So maybe they'll do their own sort of thing within rally, but I hope not. I hope SUVs don't invade. Everybody's been talking about just wait until the electric invasion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, remember back in 2015 when... Was it Mario Andretti who said, like, by 2030 or something, the Indy 500 would be electric? Somebody said that. And, everybody's like, oh, I'm never going to watch another day in my life if that happens. No, what I'm really scared of is the SUV invasion.
Well, the SUVs just use the electric invasion to kind of hide their quest,
Yeah.
I
if
think a
you want to
lot
do it for
less.
fun, then
I think a lot less like outrage has came out from Ford and GM getting rid of all of their sedans and having only SUVs. This is a thing I think is just kind of sort of flipped under the rug. And I
well,
know
that's
you
true
have at
because
least like a 30-minute rant on this,
oh,
but you're
I've
just
had
holding
numerous
it.
30-minute rants because this is where they don't. I don't know why we're talking about this, but I'm fine with it. Um, you know, I'm mad at the fact that the car market nowadays doesn't appeal to driving enthusiasts. It appeals to the common man or woman or whatever. But and that's business. It is what it is. You can go watch the Top Gear clip where Jeremy Clarkson was saying if you're no interested in driving, you should have your driving license revoked. I just saw that one again this morning, but it's the car market has slim pickings nowadays for people who are actually car enthusiasts, and that's my own rant. If you want to hear that, maybe we'll do a special someday. That's not the Rainers podcast where I'll sit here on my channel and rant about the American car market for 2 hours because I could probably do it. Let's try to get back to racing here a little bit. Ray said, any opinions of Formula E being targeted in a potential missile strike? Yeah, I mean, overall with Formula E, I don't have that much to talk about because I don't pay too much attention to it in all honesty. I used to pay attention to it quite a bit, but so yeah, I mean, don't expect to be hearing that much about Formula E here, but I did see that, as I think most people did. What questions is that going to raise for Formula One is all I have to ask.
Yeah, I don't think they're going there.
Well,
I just have to say right off the bat, I don't think they're going to end up actually going there.
Here's another thing with Formula One in Saudi Arabia is what's going on with that track? Because I know it's supposed to be a street circuit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even the Vietnam street circuit was like, and that, granted, I was always saying, oh, that's not going to happen. Not because of COVID, but because of I just didn't think they were going to get that track done in time. But what's going on over in Saudi Arabia? I haven't heard anything with that track, and that's on the calendar for this season.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, no idea.
I don't know, but I certainly think that that's going to raise some red flags.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. What's going to be funny is when the F1 video game comes out, and Saudi Arabia is supposed to be in there, and it's just not. And then it's just perfect timing when it actually doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. Unlike Vietnam, where everyone's just forced to drive that monstrosity.
Right. Oh, you know what? Let's bounce back to the World Endurance Championship, because I don't actually think we've talked about this, and it's a very interesting point. Wild Stallion said, could GT cars be removed from Le Mans entirely? I think GTE Pro will be gone after 2021 or 2022 and will not be replaced. That's a good point. And
I heard you and David said that.
Well, yes,
I was wondering, because you have to think about the IMSA has their GTD Pro thing going, and the World Endurance Championship almost refuses to take GT3. So then once all the manufacturers are gone from GT Pro, what are they going to do?
Right.
Because they're not, you already know they're not going to take a GT3 Pro category. You almost know that they're not.
Uh-huh. Well, it's
not their idea. They're not going to do it.
Let's play a game right now, all right? Let's see if you can name me the 2 full-time GTE Pro manufacturers.
It is Porsche.
Yes.
And Ferrari.
Correct. Can you name me 2 manufacturers that have committed to a top-class prototype program within the next 2 years?
Both of them.
Yep.
But you also know Corvette's coming.
Well, yeah. I mean, that. Okay, so.
And also, we didn't say anything about this, but by the way, Corvette's doing Portimao for
true.
WEC, which basically, I guarantee WEC told them to. I think David said that.
Well, no, I said that because the rumor recently has been that Portimao, or not, the World Endurance Championship has been sort of urging Corvette to enter a couple of races, whether it's for balance or performance purposes or just for, hey, let's get some fan interest because Corvette Racing is an extremely popular team. They've basically been saying, hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, run a couple of our races if you want to invite to Le Mans.
We're not giving you an invite.
Which is that's what I've heard at least. Could be wrong, but that's the consensus that I've come to with that. So yes, they are running Portimao and Spa. Interestingly, with Oliver Gavin, right? So like I had been under the assumption that Gavin was going to be doing no more driving with Corvette, and surprise, he's back. Actually, the reason I wanted to bring that up and look up something was because I'm trying to think of why they were doing that, because if I pull up the 2021 IMSA schedule and 2021 World Endurance Championship schedule, I'm trying to see if there is a 2-week overlap, because, effectively, I'd expect that any driver that goes stateside, international, and vice versa would have to probably quarantine because COVID regulation set forward by the series and just
guarantee it.
Local governments. So what does the schedule look like? We have... Oh, this is a long Wikipedia article. We have Sebring, which is on the 20th. Portimao is the first weekend of April, so April 4th. And then Spa's May 1st. So is there another overlap? So Sebring's the only question mark, because I expect Gavin's going to be running Sebring with Lexus. And then...
Maybe.
I mean, that would be my expectation. I guess he doesn't have to. But Mid-Ohio is the 16th for IMSA. And then 2 weeks earlier, I guess. Which is weird because it's labeled as May 1st. Which that's not 2 weeks, but okay. I guess if it's a Saturday and Mid-Ohio is a Sunday. Spa is supposed to be on May the 1st. And like we said, Mid-Ohio on the 20th. So perhaps... no, that's the 20th. 16th of May. Perhaps that's what the overlap is from. But I'm not too sure. I was trying to think of a reason why Gavin would be back in that car, because they did the same thing last year at COTA when Corvette raced at COTA in the World Endurance Championship with Magnussen, where Magnussen didn't even do Daytona with Corvette, and then everybody thought he was kind of done, and then lo and behold, hey, here I am, which was a little bit interesting, I think. What were we talking about before that?
Had a race at COTA.
Yes, they did.
GTE.
Okay, so yeah, GTE.
I said that Corvette was the one manufacturer that's going to be racing in Le Mans that doesn't have any prototype.
So Corvette's the only question mark to me. Because if Ferrari, when Ferrari does the Hypercar program, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they said, all right, well, we don't really need the GTE Pro program. We're going to be fighting for the overall. Why do we? And I'm sure, some of those drivers could be passed over to the Hypercar program as well. Maybe we see a Risi entered car, but then again, Risi could even go into the AM class if they wanted to. The future for...
Or would there be an AM class?
I think that there's still a place for an AM class, for sure. I mean, LMP2 at Le Mans has become really, in terms of who's fighting for the overall win, it really has become sort of a super silver class, where it's like you look at some of those lineups and there's no real AM on that lineup.
Well, look at the entries. Here's something that'd be interesting. If you look at the entries for like 2023, which is 22 or 23 the next LMP2 regulations?
23.
So 23 I would say would be the most important, because I would imagine with the new regulations LMP2 is going to be a bigger grid, because obviously right now we're just whittled down to like one Ligier and all Orekas. So I would imagine the next regulations, with Delara, Ligier, all of those, back into the mix will probably boost the entry list. And then you have the amount of entries in LMDH and LMH. How many cars do you think that leaves for a GT class?
Well, that's my point. It's like, I still think GTEM has a place, though, because GTEM will always have the gentleman driver. GTE is more of a, I think it's
Why
easier
would
to
there be a
step in.
GT AM if there's not like a GT regulation anymore?
Well, that's the tricky part. Who
Yeah,
knows?
which they should just go to GT3, but
But
they're
here's the
never going
thing.
to do
Okay,
that.
so would you, because we were talking about this a bit over the weekend, would you want, not would you want to watch a Le Mans, but would you be okay with Le Mans having no GT classes?
No.
Okay. Because that, we'll call him out right now. David Land was,
David was the only
we
one who
were
said yes
talking to him.
because
He
he
was
doesn't
saying, oh,
care.
I'd be fine with that. But, I think that there is certainly something that GT cars add to the table. More than anything else, it's the fact that people can look at those cars and say, that's a Corvette C8R. That looks like the car I saw coming home from work yesterday, which was a street Corvette C8.
I want
Or,
to see these prototypes like race through traffic too. I want them to have a challenge
yeah.
because traffic is what adds to me most of sports car racing.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're second place and you see a big gaggle of GT cars racing, you know that that's your opportunity, and they're just going to be laying it all on the line, pissing off GT drivers. Great, I love it. They needed, having no GT cars. Wow, you're not going to get held up that bad with a P2 car, especially with the next regulations.
Well, okay, let's talk about optimal scenario here. All right, if this was a dream scenario and I could have whatever I wanted, first of all, I would say I want complete and total convergence between LMH and LMDH so that they're balanced to the best of our ability.
Second, I want the ACO to not absolutely, make the LMDH cars garbage at Le Mans in their control of the BOP. I would like it to be fair
That's
among
what
all
I just said.
manufacturers.
But
Well, I guess that's convergence, but like I was thinking convergence and more racing at Daytona as well. Just complete.
well,
I guess that.
well that too. But convergence meaning that the cars are balanced,
Hmm.
as I sort of said. But GTE is in a really weird future. All right, now, because IMSA is committing entirely to GT3, and it's our best assumption that they're bringing Corvette with them. Okay, now you and I and David were talking over the weekend and said, all right, well, where does that leave Corvette at Le Mans? And David said, okay, well, they already have the C8R, the GTE car. He predicted that they could be running a full season over there with at least one car in the World Endurance Championship. To me, that doesn't sound like something GM would do. I don't see them doing an international program. I don't think their market internationally for the Corvette is quite strong enough to support that. They do a couple of WEC rounds right now, mainly the American ones because, well, actually I shouldn't say that because now they're going to Portimao and Spa. But, historically they did COTA, they did Sebring, they did that one race with the C7R in Shanghai, but that was mainly to, promote, it was to promote something, like a new something over in China with GM. But, it seems, as I said earlier, like they're doing that to satisfy the Le Mans requirement sort of deal. For me, at least. That's what it seems like. And do I see Corvette running full-time in the World Endurance Championship alongside a GT3 program? No, I honestly don't. And that's, if you watched my GTE video that I uploaded about a month ago now, I talked about, okay, where is this going to leave Corvette? Or where is it going to leave, specifically Corvette at Le Mans? Because there's almost nowhere for them to go, I think. I think that they may just be forced under the current regulations to call it quits, which, that would be a tough decision. They've become a staple name at Le Mans over the past 20 years now. And it would be a big shame if that's what they were forced to do. But, their main priority right now is IMSA. So, and I certainly don't think IMSA would have done anything. And I already said that. IMSA wouldn't have went full forward with GT3 knowing that they would lose Corvette. I guarantee that.
Oh yeah.
So
that's a smart decision for IMSA. WC, they're not going to go to GT3 just because of Corvette. I think WEC can afford to lose Corvette because, like you said, international market, there's not, I'm sure there are, but there's not as many, Corvette only diehard fans going to World Endurance Championship races or Le Mans.
Right.
I mean, there's some, but that's not the majority.
Mm-hmm.
Like if IMSA just said screw you Corvette and just totally botched them on the regulations, IMSA would lose. Like, what would a number you'd say they'd lose? I would say like 50%
Yeah, I don't think
of
50% is out of the
spectators
realm
at
at
race.
all.
Like, they would lose the majority of their fans, and it would hurt them
Look at the Corvette
substantially.
corrals. I mean, that's all you need to look
No
at.
more Corvette corrals.
Okay, so back to what I was talking about originally with the dream scenario. So I'd have conversions between LMDH and LMH. I'd have LMP2, and then, if I was in charge, Le Mans, I would want 2 GT3 classes.
I would just want one.
Yeah, you say that, but I mean
You're also saying dream scenario.
True. I guess I'll say dream with like a
two
slight
because
slight
the AM
shade of
drivers
realism.
have to be in an AM class, and we can't have AM drivers going against factory drivers because they don't like that and they bring in all the money. I get it. That's why I don't like GTD Pro and GTD AM. It should be one class. It should be one class. GTD right now, as it stands, only being privateers, has how many manufacturers in it? I mean, Lexus, not a manufacturer team, right? Oh, so cute. Yeah, it's hilarious. Funny.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, a dream scenario, then, you're allowed to say that. But there's no way you're getting rid of an AM GT class.
Literally
right
a
now.
privateer in GTLM right now. Literally a privateer. And privateers they're not like... Like, privateers are allowed in GTLM as it stands. Okay? Factory teams aren't in GTD for some reason. And now that we're going to have only GT3... They're gonna change it up to where factory and private, which I guess GT Pro still isn't limited to factory, but pretty much it is. It's pretty much what they're saying. You know what it is. Annoying. Why is sports car racing this complicated?
I don't know, but I plan on making a video about it in the future because there's still way too many questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, it works for us because we can inform people. Then again, could be easier.
Racehead, should the GT 500 class cars be allowed to compete against LMH and LMDH at Le Mans? Quick refresh if you're not familiar. GT 500 is a class in the Super GT Championship over in Japan. Extremely fast GT cars, and I don't know for sure because I haven't paid too much attention to lap times of GT 500 cars, but he did say, due to the death of LMP1 and the pace deficiency of LMH and LMDH, GT 500 cars are possibly the fastest closed-wheel racing cars in the world. You may be correct, because I have seen numbers between GT 500 cars and LMP1 cars at Fuji, and I believe they were, I was surprised at how close they were at the time, so you might be right. Anyway, so back to your original question. I'm going to say no, just straight up, because I think the problem with GT 500 is that it's not really the same ideology as LMH and LMDH. You could argue Hypercar was, and I keep meaning to do my Hypercar rant. We'll save it for, I guess, next episode. But Le Mans Hypercar was originally, everybody envisioned it as this class where you get these road-styled cars, sort of GTE cars that are just amped up with a lot more downforce, sort of like GT 500, I think is what a lot of people are anticipating, maybe a little bit more aero than GT 500. And from what we've seen right now, it sort of looks like LMP1 cars again, or at least LMP-derived cars. And it's made a lot of people upset. Understandably, if you get your hopes up for one specific style of cars, and then, that's what you had your mind set on, to see another class of cars that looks largely the same could be disappointing for sure. But I don't think the GT500 class would really fit in. And more than that, I don't think what they need right now is another class to try to balance. I think 2 is a big enough problem, and I'm already skeptical that they're going to be able to balance LMDH and Le Mans Hypercar. So adding another class on top of that, I think, would add more problems than it solves. They're 1/10 off. Oh, 1/10 of a second apart now at Fuji, I believe, compared to the 2013 Audi R18. Yeah, which is really impressive for a GT-based car. Cam said GT Pro will be a place for gold and platinums to play until 2023. Interesting that you say until 2023. Like, what do you have in mind for after that? Because as far as I know, this is IMSA's commitment for the future. But yeah, I mean, you're right. If you're used to GTD as it is right now in IMSA, you can expect largely the same with, I think it's fair to say, the same GTLM teams you have right now, maybe. Although, even that's a question mark because of BMW. And, also adding the addition of Corvette as well with a GT3 car, safe to say. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the cars themselves won't be that different from what we have in GTD right now. And I'm at a standstill again. What to talk about? But yeah, I definitely have a hypercar rant to go over when we have a slow news week, because I think if there's anything I've learned from my Toyota GR010 video, it's that people had certainly put different expectations for the hypercar class in their head, and it's caused a lot of anger, I think. Some of it unwarranted, I'd like to say, and that's what my whole rant centers around. So we'll save that for a rainy day. I don't know. I don't think I have that much else to talk about for this episode. It's been quite a long one. What are we rolling on now? We're
71 minutes.
71 minutes. It's pretty nice. But I think we're gonna wrap it up for this episode, and you can check out our Twitter, which is at Rain Race Podcast. It's been on the screen the whole time. And you can also check out our Instagram, which is new, that I don't have a hand on, but
neither do I, funny enough.
But our good friend Andrew does. And if you want to hear the latest updates from the show, you can follow on Instagram as well. If you have one, that is also at Rain Race Podcast. And we'll keep you updated with the latest on our podcast. Hopefully, we'll be back next week with another episode. If we're not going to, because of school for me or some other circumstance, you'll hear it on the community tab, Instagram, Twitter. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, you can check out the podcast anywhere podcasting platforms tomorrow. That's Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, all the fun stuff. And that's all I have for this one. So we'll see you hopefully next week, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern, for another episode of the Rain Race Podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in,